Well, it's been a while, but you're very welcome back to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast as we finally kick off for 2025. Raf Diallo here, and as always, you'll find us on YouTube, RT.ie, and wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or whatever you're having yourself. We're back just in time to preview the new League of Ireland season, and we'll also look ahead to Shamrock Rovers' UEFA Conference League playoff first leg against Molde. Plus, we've a new Republic of Ireland women's head coach in Carla Ward, and she will name her first squad this week. So, discuss all of that and more. I'm delighted to be joined by Graham Gartland and Keith Treacy, and also a new guest on the podcast, Shelbourne footballer Rachel Graham. So, Graham, Keith, and Rachel, belated Happy New Year, and I hope you're all keeping well.
Happy New Year, Raf.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Although no one's told the clouds or the weather anyway. It's a it's pretty mucky, horrible day. But look, it's that time of year. Anyway, I mean, to start off, I suppose Rachel, welcome along, and I suppose belated congrats on the FAI Cup win last November. But I think unlike Keith and Graham, I think you're the only one that's involved in a pre-season at the moment. And of course, your opening game is going to be at the start of March against Shamrock Rovers. So how has the build-up been in the last wee while?
Yeah, it's like, it's probably as enjoyable as preseason could be. It's not the nicest side of football, but we've had a couple of good weeks, couple of good results. We're away to Galway now on Saturday, and then away to Crusaders, and then we're into the President's Cup then. So that's Air Force, like the men's side, that's Air Force competitive game. So yeah, no, it's going as well. We've made some good signings, but like I was saying, it's so cold out. It's killing me in the weather. It's not the running, it's not the hard work. It's the cold nights. It's tough.
I was going to ask Keith that. Which did you prefer, Keith? Pre-seasons in the UK or in Ireland? Because they're doing pre-season in January. It's tough,
Yeah, no, I used to like the sun. It makes you feel that little bit better, didn't it? When you're about to get absolutely rinsed, but you've got that little bit of sun on your back. And there was always the carrot. My managers were always thinking, we're away for 2 weeks, lads. We're going to work hard for 12, and there's a little reward at the end. So I was always happy walking in the sun and knowing there was a little team bonding session coming towards the end.
Yeah, any pre-season tours, like in any exciting far-flung places in your time?
No, I done the usual Dubai, Marbella, things like that. But yeah, Dubai was a good one. I went to Dubai a couple of times, but I was actually under 18 at the time. So, and I'm sorry, I think I was 19 at the time, and you have to be 21 to drink over there. So every nightclub I went into, I got this big red stamp on my hand that says you can't drink. So it was Coca-Cola and 7 Up for me over in Dubai. But yeah, great times. Like, great to be over there and be running. And I've had the other side of it where I'm getting absolutely flogged out in Blanche IT. So, it could always be worse.
Yeah, it always can be. But anyway, Graham, it's a new season, obviously a lot of new things. Some things have changed, the TV coverage being one thing that has changed, of course, which has been well documented. But on the other side, of course, no new prize money or increase in prize money for clubs going into this season. But then also something else that's new, the Aviva game that's coming this Sunday between Bulls and Rovers. So that's going to be a huge, big attraction. So where do you feel the league and I suppose the domestic game is at as we're going into 2025?
I think it's great to see it finally getting recognition nationwide. I see Off the Ball have picked up that they're going to show 30 games. They're going to radio broadcast 30 games as well. And it's starting to become a bit of an industry within the league. Like I touch on probably Scotland a lot because Scotland is very insular in terms of how it looks after its football, and they only really commentate on Scottish football, and they're proud of it, and they make no bones about it. There's not much talk of UK. Now, I know Keith had said something along the lines of, or someone said at the weekend that you can still watch your football, your League of Ireland fix on a Friday and have your Premiership stuff at the weekend, and that gives them that outlet. But the coverage is everything that we've ever wanted for the league. It's to put eyes on it. It's to show that the product is good. It's to show the packed out stadiums. The interest in it is at an all-time high in I came into the league in '03, and I've never seen it as high as this. This is the most I've ever seen interest in it, and rightly so, because I think the product on the pitch is good. You're seeing good young players come through. You'd like to see more of that as well. You're seeing them having little dints in Europe, and the new European League, which we'll touch on later, has allowed for clubs to go further and progress. And like that, the facilities do need to catch up, and we can touch on that in a later show. But now that there's eyes on it, you're hoping that the facilities do catch up, because sponsorships have to come in, and they want to show off where they're sponsored, and they'll have to improve the stadium so that the sponsorship for the TV and all the broadcasting that's going out is there. For Virgin to show all 36 games, it's a massive boost for the league and boost for the players, because they know every week one of my games is going to be on the telly, and if it's an away game in Galway and the family can't travel, you can watch the games, and that's massive for players at any level. I don't care what level you play at, whether you're a full international playing all the way through. If your game's on the telly and people tune in, it means a lot, and something that our players are going to have to get used to, and it's something that I think they'll embrace in the league as well.
Yeah, and of course, we're coming off the back in the men's Premier Division season, at least. It was a brilliant, brilliant season, Keith. And of course, Shelbourne won it in the most dramatic fashion. So they come into this season with the best defence and they've kept it together. But it's interesting what they've done with their attacking options, some of which we saw in the President's Cup on Friday against Drogheda United.
Yeah, they look. I know people are quick to dismiss the President's Cup, but it was the first look. As Damien Duff said, it's the first competitive game that they have. And look, I thought Shelbourne were really good. I wouldn't be reading too much into it because I think Duffer said after the game himself, we're not going to play two up front every single game. It will be horses for courses. And I was on off the ball yesterday, and they asked me, who were you looking forward to seeing again? And the one person I want to see is Sean Boyd, and it's not because I'm an old school dinosaur and I love that physical side of it. I think he's such a good outlet for it. If you're a left back, right back, winger, centre of the pitch, if you're under any sort of pressure, it's just an easy ball to chip one up to his chest and get people in around him, and it's an easy out ball. People don't like it; they think that's not the way football should be played. But believe me, when you're a professional and you're under the cushion, you're not sure what you should do. A little chip ball down the channel into Sean Boyd is a brilliant option. And I was digging through all the stats of last season, and what Shelbourne did really well, Raf, was they won the games in Dublin. In the Dublin Derby, the so-called Dublin Derby table, Shelbourne came out with 21 points. That's more than St. Pat's. Pat's had 18, Bows had 14, and probably doesn't surprise anybody given how Rovers went last season that they only picked up 12 points in Dublin. Now, look, I'm not saying that it's all about the Dublin clubs and that's to do with it. Galway will have a big say. Nobody's looking forward to going to Galway and playing there. Cork look really strong. Not too sure what we're going to get from Derry, but I do think whoever comes out on top of the Dublin Derby table is going to be there or thereabouts at the top of the table. And yeah, look, I wouldn't be backing against Shelbourne as a Pats man. I'm looking at Pats and thinking how they ended the season last season. Raf was unbelievable. El Bazebi on one wing, Mulroney on the other. Mason Melia, I'm sure we'll touch on him again a little bit later on, but he will have a target on his back. So there's a couple of question marks over Pats as well. And Shamrock Rovers, Raf, you look at them and think, what are they going to bring to the table this season? Johnny Kenny going out the door, I think, is a big one. Neil Ferrugia going out the door is a big one as well. And that's not to say that Rovers don't have the talent in the building that can go and win the league. They definitely do. But when you look at who's leaving the building and who's coming in, there's question marks on the lads coming in, and we'll have to wait and see if they're answered on it.
Yeah, and some of the Shels' new arrivals in those attacking areas, so Mipo Odubeko, who did get a goal in the President's Cup, and then Ryan O'Kane, Ellis Chapman, a couple of others that have come in as well. How excited are you by the ones you've seen so far and what you expect to see from them?
Yeah, Odubeko is one straight away that people have mentioned, but I have to be honest with you, Raf, I love Ellis Chapman. I've seen an awful lot of him at Sligo last season, and he sort of meanders around the pitch at his own pace, but just sort of he's always in space, and it's never a coincidence how he just pops up at the right moment. He thinks about what he's doing, and look, he came off the bench for Shelbourne in the President's Cup. I think he's somebody, when you look at JJ Lunny in there, Gannon, Boyd, I think he's a brilliant addition to it, and he's probably somebody that people didn't look at the signing and think that's an unbelievable signing, but I will be looking to see what Ellis Chapman can do in a Shelbourne jersey, because, as I say, I was very impressed with what he did at Sligo last year.
Yeah, and of course, the manager, Damien Duff, is always very intense. Now, as it turns out, like, he can be 10 out of 10 in intensity as he was last year, but it's possible to go to 11 or 12. And that's something I asked Mark Coyle, who brought it up at the League of Ireland launch. And this is what he had to say.
Yeah, you've said Damien is more intense. I'm trying to imagine how more intense he could be, but how does that manifest itself day to day now?
He wouldn't mind me saying this, probably a wee bit more unhappy with things, but in a good way. He just expects such high standards, and if we're not reaching them, then he's going to tell us. And that's why where we are, it's down to them high standards and us reaching them day in, day out. So it's great for us. It's great to have that, and it adds a bit of freshness, a bit of bite, and we're just looking forward to now making sure that the season starts well and hopefully it eases off of the unhappiness bit.
So that is Shelbourne captain Mark Coyle there talking about the intensity of Damien Duff, which, if anything, has actually gone up. And Rachel, like, you would see him around the place, I suppose, Damien Duff, that is. And what's he actually like day to day when you do kind of see him around the Shelbourne camp?
Like, the one thing I would say about him is, what you see is what you get. What you see on the telly every week, it's, that's him. There's no act being put on. He's not doing anything for cameras. Like, that's him. But like, he'll always come out of his way, come over and chat to us, say hello, ask us how we're doing. Like, he'll text before our big games. He's at some of our big games, so he really does. Like, he loves the club. He's been brilliant. But like Kyle was saying there, it's so intense. Like, but to be fair, like, he's brought that team. Like, only 3-4 years ago, they were a first division team. They came up, he took over, and within 3 years, he's won a league, and that's just, his mentality of it. Like, that was really the big driving force behind that, because, I mean, he said last year he was going to win the league, and I don't think many people believed him, but he got the players believing, and that's all he needed. And look, he went and he proved his point. But he did say again during the week that, he knows now if they drop off even 0.5%, they're not going to win anything. So, like Kyle was saying, he's even more intense now. But we just say to some of the lads, what's he like? Is he really intense? But they say, yeah, of course he is. But they also say, like, Joey O'Brien is probably worse. So it's not just Duff and a one-man team. It's the whole coaching staff, it's the whole squad have bought into that. But that's only one side of winning the league, your mentality. And of course you need that belief, but you also need the players. So we were talking about it, but they've recruited really well. They've Ellis Chapman's really good, and Meepo looked, really dangerous in the President's Cup, and I've seen him in 1 or 2 pre-season games as well. He's going to be a right handful. So look, I think they'll be up there. They'll be thereabouts, definitely challenging. But like they were saying, they're going to have to be at, their best again to beat off the Pats and the Rovers, and even Boas this year have, made some really good signs. So I think it's going to be a much tougher league. But yeah, I think they'll be up there and thereabouts, definitely.
Yeah, and as a club as a whole, and you've been part of this as well, so there is a winning mentality that's sort of flowing through the veins at Shelbourne, and it would have started on the women's side in terms of the team you've had and the trophies you've won over a period of time. And now, as you've said, Damien Duff and the men's side have sort of added to that now as well by winning the first league title in 18 years. So there must be an electric buzz on every side of the house at this stage.
Yeah, like obviously this is our 10th year now at Shelbourne in the Women's League of Ireland, say. So like, we've always kind of been there or thereabouts challenging. We've, either come fourth, second or third in the league. So we've always, as players, had that belief that, we can win it, and we've driven that ourselves as players. But now it's a brilliant time for the club. There's a real buzz about the place, and even Talca Park now on a Friday, like, it's electric. They're close to getting sold out crowds. It's brilliant. So yeah, no, it's a great time for the club. We've some good underage teams coming through as well, and yeah, it's a really exciting time for the club. But yeah, hopefully we were raging last year that we just missed out on the league. It would have been amazing to do the men and the women, but hopefully this year we can do both.
Yeah, and then on the other flip side of it, Shamrock Rovers, of course, 4 in a row champions, Graham, before being toppled last season. Obviously, they've had a good run in Europe in that time, but when we look at the transfers, as Keith alluded to earlier in the podcast, the pace has sort of gone out in attacking areas. I mean, Johnny Kenny gone back to Celtic, and that's where he's going to be staying. Neil Farrugia's moved on to Barnsley, and then even the directness of a Dara Burns, who's now going to Grimsby. That attacking area is going to be very interesting to see what they do with it, because the speed was one thing that benefited them through Europe, for example.
Oh, 100% in Europe, yeah. They went with Farrugia and Kenny up front, and it caused them all sorts of problems. Both different in terms of how they use the pace. Farrugia would be a really powerful runner with the ball, carries it, gets you up the pitch. He still has running power out of, but Johnny Kenny's pacing behind in the European games that we done constantly on the shoulder, and as a defender, when you're playing against that pace, it does put that little bit of fear into you that even a misplaced pass can lead to a chance for him, and he was excellent in Europe, and in fairness, Rovers were excellent in Europe as well, but they've lost that. They brought in young Michael Noonan, which Keith would know well from St. Pat's. He would have worked for him. Again, similar mould to Mason Melia, left-footed version, really good in the box, can do really well off crosses. But again, it's a jump for him, and I think you have to mind them in terms of how to use them, because you can't just obviously put all this pressure on a young 17-year-old kid. They brought in Grant from Bowes, who probably struggled at Bowes. Did he play him off the front? Healy comes in, who, you know, can play in beside Gary O'Neill. Did he play O'Neill, Watts, Healy as the three options in there? But yeah, they've lost that little bit of cutting edge. But, you know, Rovers have always been based on how well they keep the ball and probe chances and build sort of sustained attacks in the opposition. And when you have the likes of Bourke and Jack Bourne and Dylan Watts, there's always going to be goals from that trio of people. Honohan on the left then has provided a lot of goals as well. I think McGinty's a big signing for them. I think they would have lost a lot of points last year just through indecision, not necessarily on polls all the time, but just that indecision caused by goalkeeper errors, a lack of communication. But yeah, look, it's a big season for them. When you can see the firepower that Shels have brought in, like Meepo looks electric. He just needs to be more consistent with his performances. But they brought in Kelly and O'Kane, which is out and out pace as well. And as Keith alluded to earlier, if they want to go to a three up front where you can go Meepo off one of the sides with O'Kane and Kelly, and then you can play Chapman off the front, that's a powerful front three with Chapman backing them up. So St. Pat's have a lot of firepower as well with Mason. Obviously, they brought in Simon Power, which gives them pace. If they can keep him fit, he'll stretch the game, and they've obviously brought back Carty too. So, yeah, like unless Rovers do something in the next to bring somebody in, I'm not sure they can. Gaffney's still out injured at the minute, so they're nursing him back to see what can come back. And look, if they can get Rory Gaffney back fit and healthy, I think they've a right chance of going and reclaiming the league title.
Yeah, and then of course they've a very interesting start of the season because there's so many games coming up in the fact that they have the European commitments as well, Graham. I mean, with the Molde tie first leg in Norway on Thursday, and the other interesting thing, Marcus Poom also not being at the club now, and the fact that they were going for legs in midfield as a tactic in the European phase earlier. That's how do you feel that's going to affect things against Molde in this tie, and what chance do you sort of give them? Because also Molde have disadvantages in the sense their league doesn't start until March, so there's a few things in balance here.
Yeah, look, I think the game's in the balance. I really do. I when you combine the results that of similar teams that they played, Molde beat Larne 3-0. Rovers obviously went up and beat Larne really, really well. Molde lost at home to Applewell and Rovers drew 1-1 with them. But I do feel that their front two in Europe was what gave them that sort of hope in games that they could absorb pressure knowing that they had a threat. And once you know you have a threat, you'll stay in the game knowing that all it takes is one. And it happened in some of the games. Applewell, they're down to 10 men. Dylan Watts pops up. Over in Prague, I think it was Johnny Kenny popped up with a goal as well. So they'll always take a chance. I think the legs in midfield, Darren Nugent played a little bit as well and brought a lot of legs. But I think they're looking at Healy coming in, and then they might play Healy beside O'Neill and Watts, and then one off the front. And who that one is off the front, I don't know, because Bourke at times is electric, and again a really strong ball carrier. But this is different to the group stages, and it's not a one-off game, so you can feel their way into this and see what Molde are like. I think it's a toy in the balance. This one could go either way. I'd actually fancy probably Rovers a little bit, considering how well they've done in the group stages. I think Molde, like Rovers finished 10th in the group, and Molde finished 23rd. And they got through with the last minute. I think they won 4-3 at home just to scrape into that group. So I think on form, especially in the European competitions, I think Rovers would be slight favourites going into the game.
Yeah, and Molde, I think they did play Pats in a friendly in Spain on the 1st of February and lost as well, which was kind of interesting.
Hannerby last week 1-0 as well off the back of that. So Pete might have got a report on the Pats game or what he thought were their weaknesses.
Yeah, Keith, were you at that, or did you get a sense of what to expect from Molde?
No, I wasn't at it, and to be fair, I know Pats did really well in the game. I spoke to a couple of Pats head in and around it, and they were impressed with how Pats were going. I didn't really get too much of a report on Molde, but to be honest, we're talking about the legs and Johnny Kenny. A lot of what Shamrock Rovers did in Europe was, nice knee play, get people to suck them in with the press, and then you get Johnny Kenny with some space in behind, and he's absolutely ruthless. Took a lot of legs out of the middle of the pitch in Poom. You've took a lot of direct speed off the wings, and you've took that that one chance person who comes in behind and scores. So I wouldn't be as confident as Graham is, but I do think that Shamrock Rovers have enough to go and beat Molde. But just given how many moving parts there is and how many people have gone out the door and come in the door, I think it's a different game than it would have been probably 2 months ago for Shamrock Rovers. So that would have me a little bit more downbeat about it. But I still think Shamrock Rovers should have enough there.
Yeah, and obviously the tie in between what is Sandwich, of course, is this Aviva Stadium game against Bohs, and there's going to be a huge amount of hype now. Shamrock Rovers will be used to that. They've just gone through a European League phase. But Bohs, on the other hand, they've been used to the Aviva Stadium from the cup finals they played in. But what have you made of the signings, Keith, when you look at what they brought in? Obviously, Colin Whelan, hugely talented. Keith Buckley is like a new signing, I suppose, as a leader. Rob Cornwall will be back in the fold again. And then there's this wild card of Lys Mousset, a former Premier League striker. I'm not sure what to expect.
Yeah, I was in RTÉ Soccer Saturday, I think it was a week ago, when Pat Fenlon was in, and he got a little beep on his phone, and he looked and he went, the trialist has just scored. And I went, who's the trialist? And he told me, that's Lys Mousset. And I went, the boy from the Premier League? He said, yeah, that's him. And then, oh God. And then now the next thing that came into my head, Raf, was, what's he doing in the League of Ireland? He's obviously lost his way a bit. Look, he's a very, very talented boy. He was rated as a £13 million striker at one point. I think he scored 6 goals in a Premier League season. He was at Bournemouth as well under Eddie Howe. He's a French under-21 international. But there is an element of risk to this. He hasn't played an awful lot of football lately. There's an awful lot of people with a whole host of talent. And to be fair, I probably throw myself into that bracket when I came back from England, and I think it was 2015, I signed for Drogheda. Had all the talent in the world, but I also had a big, big belly on me and not an awful lot of fight. So I got found out pretty early in the league. Talent is only half the battle. It's really only half the battle. People, if Lys Mousset turns up to the league and he thinks I have the talent, there should be enough, he will get found out quick enough. So if he has some fire and some desire still in his belly, I'm sure he'll be okay, Raf. But there's a question mark over him, and there's a gamble on both sides. But it is something that makes you want to go to Daily Mount and watch and think, let's see if he still has it about him. I think Niall Morahan, again, coming in from Sligo, I think he's neat and tidy. I think he's somebody who won't lose the ball too often in there for you either. So he's somebody you can build your play around. And he's one of those that won't get a whole host of headlines, but he's a nice, neat player. As I say, really like him. Dawson Devoy, I think, can kick on again. And young McManus as well is somebody I really like at Bohs. So I look at Bohs and I think they've strengthened. But I also look at Pats, Rovers, Shelbourne and think, well, they've all strengthened as well. So I'm not too sure what Bohs can expect this season, but you would imagine it has to be a whole lot better than last season.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I spoke to Alan Reynolds also about the Mousset deal as well, and he kind of echoed what you said there. That's a risk for the player, but it's also a risk for the club as well. And of course, what has been documented, his time in his more recent clubs hasn't gone particularly well. He hasn't really played in 18 months. I think at Bochum, they weren't particularly happy with his efforts, so they sort of parted ways. And, when a high-profile player, Rachel, comes into the league like that, and especially when you're kind of sitting in an opposition dressing room, like what's the general chit-chat within a dressing room or training ground when you hear like a rival has signed a sort of wild card, like a Mousset type?
Yeah, we kind of ourselves had something similar a couple of years ago where we
With
actually
Heather O'Reilly.
Heather O'Reilly.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, Heather is like a big US international player. She's won a World Cup, like 3 Olympics. It was over 200 caps for the US national team. So, and I actually just seen it on Twitter. It was like Shelbourne have signed Heather O'Reilly. So it was a bit of a mad one, kind of similar to the Bohs one. But you do, first of all, you're like, oh my God, we've signed a great player. There's excitement. But then you also do kind of start to see maybe the negative side of it is, what's she going to be like in around her squad? Do they think they're above us? Are they better than this league? And, how are they going to react to everybody? But like, we had a really positive experience with hers. So I would just say, give him a chance. But like that, he's obviously super talented. I mean, you can't get to the Premier League without being super talented. And whether you play or you don't play in the Premier League, once you've got there, you have something special. And I don't know if you've seen his goal against Waterford in the pre-season friendly that he scored. I mean, if he scores that in a few weeks' time, it's goal of the season for sure. So look, he's obviously super talented. He has something there. But like he was saying, there's a reason why he's not there at the moment. And he's here and he hasn't played in 18 months and clubs have let him go. But look, I think you give him a chance. You have to give him that benefit of the doubt. But I think it's the most interesting signing, definitely from any club, and there's definitely going to be a lot of eyes on him on Sunday. I seen he started last week in their last pre-season friendly, so you would kind of assume maybe that's their starting 11 for this week. But yeah, no, he's definitely going to have a lot of attention on him. But like that, he needs to have the attitude if he wants to make it. This isn't a pub league. It's it's professional. It's tough. So he has the talent for sure, but he definitely has to back it up with an attitude on and off the pitch.
Yeah, and one thing Alan Reynolds did say to me was that he has matured a bit, and they have spoken about all these things as well. So I think he seems fairly confident that they'll see the best of him in this first part of the season. But another player with a huge amount of talent, but at a very much earlier in his career, of course, is Mason Melia. And as you know, last week it was confirmed that he is going to be joining Tottenham Hotspur at the start of next year. Fee €1.8 million initially, and then that could go up to 4.2 million, and also a 20% sell-on clause. Huge deal for St. Pat's. And I did ask Stephen Kenny about this, obviously his manager, who will have him for this next season coming up, about whether there's a potential of making this a precedent. So let's just listen to part of this clip. The rest of it you can find on rte.ie/sport.
Well, it's, hopefully it's a sort of, it can be a turning point in that regard. But I don't know. It isn't easy for clubs. It isn't easy for clubs, and the growth of agents, and their influence on the game, because they have to represent their players, their clients, and their families in the best way they know how, and then clubs are in a quandary. They may not get the player unless they agree to certain clauses, and it is a minefield. Do you say, well, we're not going to take the player because there's a clause? And these are dilemmas for clubs, and so it just shows you it was a positive outcome, because obviously got the move he wanted. The club recruited him. Gerard O'Brien, director of football, recruited him. Gary Kelleher obviously negotiated with Tottenham, and he played in their team for the year and some of the previous year, and he came in quite young, so he's been a credit to himself. And throughout the leagues, in Scandinavia, for example, they can command very high fees for players, and so just it's different now. Traditionally, he would have been definitely gone at 16. You feel, he would have been gone at 16. With the advent of Brexit, changes the dynamic of that.
That is Stephen Kenny there talking about Mason Melia and the idea of whether, and I suppose the dilemma of whether it's possible to make this a precedent in the league. But Graham, what did you make of the move when you first heard of it? And also on that idea of whether a fee like that can become a precedent for League of Ireland clubs, and then which would help bring money into the league and turn it into an industry as time goes on. Do you see this as something that has legs in terms of that it can be replicable in other places?
I think it has to be, for us as a nation, to really drive on and improve our. I know the clubs mightn't care about this stuff, but to improve our national team overall, I think we need to have that where kids are getting exposed a little bit earlier. They're minded like Mason was, brought in and out of the team. If he was in form, they kept him in. They take him out when they needed to. I don't want to use the term minded him, but they picked which games to play him in, picked when to use him, really sort of, again, took care of his development. And that's the big thing for me, is like, if you take care of his development and you expose these young players early to this league, they will kick on. There's leagues all over Europe that are probably a little bit level similar to us, that are selling young players for these fees all the time. And what happens is it circles back into the development squads, and they're able to produce more of them. And that's what happens, is you filter back down to the academies, and the academies are able to keep producing these young players, men and women, because again, the academy should be aligned like that. And then that funding goes in and it keeps producing young players. And every now and then a superstar will come like Mason. I'm not saying that he's a superstar, but in this scenario, he's the one that's gone for the fee. But what happens is you get 5 or 6 young players underneath it that will come and find their level, and it mightn't be what Mason goes on to, but it's another level. Before you know it, you have another international that might come maybe in a different position, and that's the thing, that it should filter down. And with young players like that coming through, if you expose them and they have the talent and they have the, as Rachel touched on, the attitude of consistently trying to be better, consistent effort, consistent learning, they will find their way through. And I think it's about time that we actually put value in our young players and put value in the work that's gone into them from grassroots clubs, whether it was St. Joseph's with Mason, then he moves on to Pats, and then he goes, or other clubs where there's kids just at an academy all the way through. IK Arazi makes his debut for Standard Liège yesterday. He's the same age group, left winger, and we had loads of clubs after him, and he picks to go there, and now he's playing in the first team at 17. And it just shows you that the potential is there. It's just finding that time. And in fairness to Pats, they were probably struggling a little bit. They weren't in great form. They weren't chasing anything. So it was an ideal opportunity to put them in. But can we be brave enough that when there is things on the line that we play these kids and see what they're about? And that will increase their value, because scouts looking in will go, there was something on that game and that boy turned up and performed, and that's a box that they tick as well. Is he able to handle the occasion? The answer is yeah. I would have came up against Mason at 14 when he was with Joey/Bray, and then he obviously went to Pats and excelled there and kicked on, and he just always had this raw potential, pace over the top, could hold the ball up, but I think his hold-up play has really improved, and I think if he can add more goals to his game, I think he has a right chance. And that's what Spurs are looking at, that potential. They're looking at all this potential that he has, that he's doing this at 17 years of age in a league with grown men. Again, that's what they're judging her off. Imagine what he'd be like at 22. And that's what they're buying into. They're buying that potential, and it's a great move, and it sets a precedent that we need to hold value in our young players and not be letting them go for 50 grand or 100 grand here and there, or just a compensation deal. Actually hold the value in your young players, and that will circle back down to the next crop of players that are coming through. And then what happens is it kicks its way up and we'll have a more competitive international squad, hopefully, in the next 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, and then overall for Pats, Keith, I mean, as you said, they finished last season like a train, and they were brilliant. And actually, if there had probably been 3 or 4 more weeks in the season, maybe they would have gone on, and they could have gone on and possibly won it maybe. But Stephen Kenny's made minimal changes to the squad, so what they brought in July and the summer of last year seems to be the core of what they want. And they've often started seasons where there's a bit of a favourites tag on them, or where they're expected to finish in the top 2 or 3. They've made slow starts to the season, but with Stephen Kenny there seems to be a very different feel coming into 2025.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Raf. And the first thing is, I don't think he's made that many changes because it's not broke. How they finish the end of the season is how they'll want to start this season. And yeah, I'm glad you referenced how slow the start was, because that's what killed St. Pat's last season. If I know John Daly ended up losing his job, but it was, we play each other 3 times in the league. By the time you play each other once, that's only 9 games into the league, but that's when it's starting to take shape. So, I'm never going to say the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season are must-win games, but Pats need to start quickly. They don't want to be chasing. They don't want to be 3rd, 4th in the league going into Europe, because anything can happen in Europe. You can get stretched. You can do really well, end up in a group phase or somewhere, and all of a sudden the squad is really, really stretched. So I think, and looking at Pats' start, they've Drogheda. I know Galway's a difficult place to go, but Drogheda, Galway, Sligo, Derry, and then Rovers. So look, I think that's a reasonable enough start. If you can go and get some points on the board early doors, that would be ideal. But look, I think Romal Parma, I know he was there last season, but getting him back into the building is a big one, because I thought he was excellent. I know he had a couple of injuries here and there, but when he played, he was brilliant, and he got better with every game he was playing. Raf, the way he turns in tight situations and sees a pass, it's really, really good. So yeah, I don't think an awful lot is broke there. I think Sean Hoare coming in as well is a very astute signing. Again, it's not somebody who grabs the headlines, probably because he's a centre half, but I think he will be a nice, good, solid addition to St. Pat's. And probably a strange one, because I feel Sean Hoare has a little bit left in the locker, and you would imagine that Shamrock Rovers, having done so well in Europe, would have the finances to keep him at the club if they wanted. But maybe he's seen something in terms of a Pats, what they're going to do this season. I'm not too sure, but I'd be very surprised if it was just finances alone that got Sean Hoare into Inchicore.
Yeah, whereas Derry City, there's a little bit of uncertainty. Obviously, they were in a two-horse race for the title last year and then wound up sort of finishing fourth. But and they also lost the FAI Cup final as well to Drogheda United, where they would have come in as slight favourites. Of course, there's been a change of manager. Rory Higgins had done very well over a period of time, but Tiernan Lynch, who has done brilliantly with Larne in the Northern Irish Premier Division, he has come in as manager. I was speaking to him at the launch as well, and one of the things we did talk about was the signings. So here's that clip.
There's lots of top footballers at Derry City. I think you just look what they've done over the last couple of seasons, and there was lots of experience moved on. So it was important that we tried to bring a little bit of experience in and around it. We also felt it would probably be worthwhile getting some new faces, maybe new to the league, fresh to the league, and bringing in the likes of Gavin White and Liam Boyce, Shane, Dom Thomas. It's been exciting. It's been good. It's been good for the players that were already there, and they've actually embedded really well.
All right, so that is Tiernan Lynch, the Derry City manager, and he was just talking about the signings they brought in. And one of the things we did talk about was, Graham, was the sort of the age profile. That there's been a huge focus on the fact there's been a few 30-somethings coming into the club and the direction that the Candy Stripes are going to be taken. Like, what have you made of the changes they've made to it? Because a few experienced names did go out, and a few interesting names, some of them who are new to the league, have come in.
Well, I spoke to someone from Derry last year, but we ended up doing a few of their games up there, and they're struggling to get players in. Some of it can be down to Brexit and just the uncertainty around that for where Derry is. They brought in some experienced lads in terms of in the league, which is Benson, but then they bring in Boyce and Thomas, who would have had really long careers in Scotland and have done really well, but they probably weren't getting enough game time over there. I know Boyce was behind Lawrence Shankland at Hearts. So they have brought in, and he's obviously looking to make an impact straight away. And if you can make an impact straight away and start winning games, it might be easier to attract younger players. I remember working with a coach in Scotland, and like the big thing for him was that his driving age was going to be from 24 to 28. He was going to have majority of the team was going to be made up by that age group, and then he was going to throw in one or two young lads and then one or two experienced lads that would get you through the game. But he wanted the 24 to 28 year olds just to bring their energy into the game all the time. And as for all Derry's experience, there was times when I felt he needed to play with a lot more intensity last year, in the cup final just being a prime example of that. Drogheda just played with so much more intensity to their game with and without the ball. It wasn't just that they were, intensity in their defending and putting bodies in the way. I thought how they attacked and the counter-attack, they attacked with purpose. And Derry looked really, really dull. So it'd be interesting to see how they set up this year and what style of play they have. But it doesn't allow them to play with that intensity constantly when you have an age profile like that. And especially on an Astro where the aches and pains, you just don't recover as well. It's not as easy on the body as that. So, yeah, I'm unsure of what Derry are going to be like. I think it's a wait-and-see approach. And I think it's a wait-and-see approach for a couple of teams. Cork have brought in something like 8 players as well. There's going to be a wait-and-see how they turn out and adapt to the league. Drogheda have brought in a lot of players, but some of them are lads that are returning to the league. And Waterford have brought in an awful lot of players. Sligo have had a high turnover as well. And the teams that haven't, which is Shels, Pats, Rovers, they're probably your favourites at the minute because of that, because they're just adding to the base that they have. Do Rovers need more firepower? Only time will tell, but they might need support for if they are going to play Noonan or if Gaffney comes back. But it'd be interesting to see what they are at the moment, because I don't think they finished the season well at all last year. They had both competitions in their hand and let them both slip away, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens up there. They have a better training base, which would be better for them.
At Owen Begg,
again, you can't put energy back into legs if they're gone,
Yeah, that training centre at Owen Begg, of course, which is the Derry GA Centre of Excellence. I did ask Lynch about that as well, and he did say it was going to be massive for them. There's a good piece by Dan McDonald in the Irish Independent, which kind of sets out how difficult logistically things were last season. I suppose, Rachel, for yourself, in terms of different training grounds and things that you've had, like how big a difference has like getting into a setup where it's, everything is seamless behind the scenes? Like how beneficial has that been sort of going into different seasons?
I think it makes a huge difference. I was listening to Rory Higgins talk about it, and he was saying, you know, the lads would train somewhere, say on the pitch, they'd get changed, then they'd have to drive to a gym, work there, drive back to another place. So like, I mean, that's a mess. And like we've had a little bit of it where your training venue is, you know, we train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you've 3 different venues, and even that's not great. You want somewhere where you just, you know, you feel like this is their venue, this is their setup, this is their home almost. Makes a huge difference, not even for the players you have, but even for attracting players in, like players that want all that messing around where they're back and forth and not sure where they are week in, week out. Like it's not appealing. And if you're professional football, you shouldn't have that. So I think that'd be huge for Derry this year, be much better for them. And they've obviously brought in new players as well. So I think, look, obviously had a hugely disappointed end to the season last year. So I think all these little things help. Like if your players are happy, you know, they'll play better. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it makes any difference. I think they said they were training on grass and Astro, so that'd be interesting to see, you know, because obviously they play on Astro. So can they make the adjustment to 2 different ones?
Yeah, and Keith, for Sligo Rovers, you mentioned Niall Moran, who's gone out of the house to go to Bohemians. Obviously served as captain there as well. Ed McGinty, another blow in terms of the goalkeeping situation, and then you have Ellis Chapman as well, who, as we spoke about as well, has gone out the door. Now, the one change they did bring in, and with John Russell there signing a 2-year deal, he's got Jesse Actison, who's a Canadian set piece coach, who's come in. So I think they seem to be looking for marginal gains there to maybe sort of make up for some of the players that have gone out the door.
Yeah, I think it's really clever. Why not? You look across the water to England, and generally, you know, I'm a big Arsenal fan, and when Arsenal are on song with set pieces, they generally win games, and it should never be shied away from. I mean, not to touch on the sports thing again, but when Ange Postecoglou says stuff like we don't really bother with set pieces, it's just one of those things. Set pieces can win you the league, they can lose you the league, they can keep you in the league, or they can relegate you. And if you're on the right side of, you know, scoring set pieces and not conceding from them, you'll do all right in the league. It's your bread and butter. It's the basics of the game. So the fact that John Russell is going down the set piece route doesn't really surprise me, because Keith Andrews gone into Brentford. There's a whole host of set piece coaches now. Charlie Adam is in as a set piece coach. They're all over the place. I think it's the new flavour of the month. But, you know, you're at the mercy of the delivery. If the delivery is not good or it's over the top, then, you know, all the work on the training ground means nothing. So it is all about the delivery still, but movement is key, timing is key, and yeah, like I say, they're a big part of the game. So many games, Raf. Even, you know, we'll talk about Real Madrid and Manchester City. There's so much talent on that pitch tomorrow night. Could easily be decided by a set piece. So why you would not, you know, go hell for leather on set pieces on a, you know, during the week in a training ground is beyond me. But yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think it's exactly what the league needs. And I think it's probably the first of many set piece coaches coming into the league.
Yeah, and of course, set pieces have been a great boon for Galway United as well under John Caulfield over the last wee while. So I was also speaking to him at the launch and what he's looking to do in terms of evolving the team.
I suppose last year we did okay. The challenge was we probably didn't score enough. This year, you know, we've worked on bringing in players that are more creative, that can offer more goals, and hopefully we can score more goals. But I think the overall excitement, that there's real positivity in the league. Crowds are very good, and the fact I think it's just so competitive is good for the league.
Yeah, and I suppose you mentioned you want to score more goals, but defensively, like, huge amount of credit. Like, I think only Shels conceded fewer than you did across the league. Like, but again, you know, when you're building a team, is it always that thing of just build from the back first and then work your way forwards? Yeah,
well, I think the challenge for us was coming out of the first division. You know, the gap between the first and the Premier Division is quite significant, and people don't understand that. And I think coming up, there was probably an air of caution that we had to make sure that we were, you know, defensively solid, and probably we certainly played a bit that way for parts of the season. But certainly after the experience of, we've kept most of our squad from last year, they've experienced that, and we've been doing a lot of work in pre-season to be more creative, trying to score more goals, and we brought in some new players to help us doing that. So yeah, but still at the same time, if you're asking me, do I want to have a good defensive record? Of course you do.
So that's John Caulfield, Galway United manager. I was also chatting to Greg Cunningham, the captain as well, who was back in the second half of last season, is enjoying life back home in his hometown club after a great career over the water. But Graham, Galway, great defensive record last season. Only Shelbourne had a better one. But as John Caulfield said himself there, he's very conscious of the fact that they need to score more goals. So when you look at the signings they've made and not necessarily changing the core too much, do you think they can bring about that attacking edge?
They brought in Dwyer, Stoynes and Wilson on loan. Again, like Rachel touched on this as well. When you're coming into this league, it's full of players that are probably playing to their maximum, and you can't so. It's interesting to see when new players come in, how they adapt to it and how they get used to it and how they find their feet and know that they're up against players who are going to give their all. And whatever about quality, you have generally players who have really good attitudes and want to be professional footballers. So be interesting to see how these lads get on, because they're coming into the unknown, and it's an unknown for us even looking in at them. So we just have to wait and see how they turn out. It is based off Galway get their confidence from knowing that defensively they're strong and one goal might nick them a game. And if they can get a player that can nick them that goal, worth a wait and goal for somebody like Galway, because like you said, defensively they're solid and they've no problem with shutting up shop. Whether that Stoynes comes in and does it or Dwyer, I don't know. I'd be interested to see, do they need more chances? Do they need to create more chances at times? Yeah, they probably do as well. So it's not just down to one striker can come in and fix all this. I know Keith touched on the Arsenal stuff, and that was the one thing, the only criticism I have of Arsenal, not in terms of not recruiting a striker, but playing with a little bit more risk. That defensively you are really, really solid. You're not going to give up many chances. So just have that little bit element of risk in the final third. And if Galway can bring that small little bit, because you don't want to tweak it too much and leave the door open and take away what you're really good at and your strengths. But if you can play with a little bit more risk, create a couple of more chances per game, it might increase the goal tally. But I think Galway will be okay. Like I said, I think they'll find their place in the league and mid-table, and it's a really tough place to go. And John Caulfield's going to set up his team, and what they have in abundance is an honesty of effort in their group, that they just stay in games. They're constantly in games. They're a thorn in their side. They can suffer in games and not worry about it. Doesn't faze them, and then break. I seen them play at Rovers where they go and score off a break, and they were excellent. So yeah, like Galway, I think Galway will be okay. Like you said, if they can build off that base, I think they'll be fine. But when you have John Caulfield and Ollie Horgan in charge, I think that experience will kick in.
Yeah.
One thing I think is great about Galway, Raf, is talking about John Caulfield policing. I don't think that dressing room needs an awful lot of policing, because Brendan Clark's a very good professional, McCormick and Greg Cunningham. I think them three, if John Caulfield can come in and read the right act whenever he needs to. But generally, I think they've got some really good professionals there, and anybody coming into a Galway is going to know what the standards are. It's going to come from the manager, and it's going to come from them three senior lads. So I would echo what Graham is saying. I think they'll be absolutely fine again this season, which begs the question: who's going to be the one?
Yeah, and we'll talk about a few more clubs as well. Of course, Galway's average age, which is second highest in the league, Derry's just slightly ahead as the eldest. But Drogheda United was a club, of course, that did extremely well last season in terms of winning the cup and then also staying up via the playoffs. And I was also speaking to Kevin Doherty about the new signings, and a big part of it is how they're going to replace France Piero.
We signed we've probably 5 centre forwards. Franz was great for us, but he moved on. Again, you just have to move on with that. But we have, you've got Dougie there, and Dougie picked up a bit of an injury in pre-season, so we'll have to make sure try and get him back as soon as possible. But we have signed Josh Thomas from Swansea, we've Thomas Salua, we've Shishin Bawa, who will be really like a new signing because he got injured halfway through the season, and he was probably one of our better players. He certainly was one of our better players, if not our best player in the first half of last season. And you've young Bradell, Bosakani, you've Warren Davis can play up there. You've plenty of options, and again, people probably will just assume that the way we played last year with the two up front and all that, we'll do the same. And we have worked on a few different systems in pre-season, so that was pre-season for, but we'll see how we get on. We are, but I'm really happy with the recruitment and what we've done.
So that's Drogheda United manager Kevin Doherty there as they go into this season, and there's always a sense, Graham, that like Drogheda are sort of building year on year. There's a lot happening off the pitch as well in terms of developments in and around the ground that they have now, and also the plans in terms of moving into a new stadium down the line. I was also speaking to Keith Long at Waterford just about their plans, and the one thing that kind of unites both of them is, respectively, they have that club ownership model where they've Walsall and Fleetwood, and there's pros and cons to that in terms of players you can bring in and players you can that go out the door. So in terms of Drogheda and Waterford, what do you make of the situations they're in terms of the squads that they're coming into, Graham?
Again, I watched the Drogheda game the other night. I was probably a little bit worried. I think Shelbourne played with a bit of an edge, and Drogheda will hope to get that as the season goes on. Will Kevin be overly worried about it? Not particularly. I think Shelbourne were just excellent on the night. They brought back Keeley, who knows the league and who knows Drogheda really well, and he'll replace Webster in the middle of that back three. They brought in Cruz, a lad who was at Rovers as a kid, went out to Bray, and now he's gone up there. Hui was a big signing to return. He was excellent, man of the match in the cup final. Really, really good. A really good one-on-one, shut down defender. And then they brought in a Lua up front that you're hoping can fill the void. But with Douglas James Taylor, they've a goal scorer, a player that is strong enough to hold up the ball, quick enough that he can get down the side and trouble you. And he's just calmness in the box. Like some of the goals, he's really calm and he's finishing. And he's going to get them goals. I feel he might be the difference for Drogheda this year, where he will get them goals, especially at times, like just bringing that level of calmness in the penalty box for them. Lua was excellent in the semi-final against them. I don't know if that influenced Kevin to sign him, but he played off the left up front for Wexford, and he was excellent that day in the semis, set up a couple of goals. So maybe they're looking at him being the pace and power to stretch the game, and Douglas James Taylor can be a bit more the focal point. But with everything that's going on around it, these teams are just trying to consolidate until they can get a better training ground and a better stadium, and that's what Drogheda were. And having speak to people in the club and living up here, that's what they're trying to get to. Where before, in my time with Drogheda, they put the cart before the horse, where they really invested heavily in the squad and then said, oh, well, everything else will follow. And it didn't follow. And then you're left with nothing at the end of it. So I get the impression of the new owners that they're basically trying to go infrastructure first, build our facilities, build a stadium, and then hopefully fund it into the club. Last year, the big thing for them was they got a house up here that allowed them to put their loan players in and sign players, and that was a massive incentive in keeping the likes of Hui and Douglas James Taylor. In terms of Waterford, they've lost, like Bagley, he's a really good player for them. Lonergan, which they've brought in, which is a benefit of that model that you're talking about. He'll do well with Padraig Ahmed up front. They've lost Parsons. I really like Parsons. Parsons has gone to Bowes. I know Keith was touching on the players that Bowes brought in, but I think that's a really good signing from Alan Reynolds, which you would have known Parsons. But it'd be interesting to see what they come in. They brought in young Conan Noonan from Rovers on loan. But again, it's just a wait and see how they settle into the league and see how they perform. And again, it's just about consolidating their place in the league and trying to build on it year in, year out. And I think Drogheda are in a place to do that. Again, what Waterford are trying to do, I don't know around their infrastructure too much as I would about Drogheda, but can they consolidate and stay in the league and build on last season, which was a terrific season from Waterford's point of view, having just been promoted.
Yeah, and they made a kind of slow, they had a slow end to the season in a certain sense, but that mightn't be the worst thing in terms of it. It's a reminder of, like, you need to kick on early on, which is something Keith Long also talked about at the launch. But consolidating themselves in the league, Keith, that's what Cork City will be looking for under Tim Clancy, who knows what it's like to bring a club up and then try to keep them in the league. And Cork, of course, have firepower with Sean Maguire and Rory Keaton, but also then what do you make of the supply lines that is going to try and help them get the goals that would potentially keep them in the league?
Yeah, I actually ended up sitting next to Tim Clancy at the sports writers dinner just before the new year, and I was picking his brains about next season, how he thinks it's going to go, and he wasn't overly confident, but he said, look, I think we'll have enough to stay in the league. That's going to be our number one aim. Hopefully we can do a little bit more than that. But look, I have to be honest, I think Rory Keaton, I've seen a lot of him at Pats. I know he had his injuries, but he, again, as an ex-winger, you look at him and think he's a big lump of a lad. You get down the wing, it's only a half-decent ball thrown into the box, and he's going to get there or thereabouts. And with Shawnee Maguire as well, backing him up, you've got to love them two up front. You'd imagine the two of them will play. And Greg Bulger still going strong. I know Greg really well, and he's somebody that just keeps on trucking along. So he's brilliant. Dyke Steele as well, Alex Nolan coming in. I think Cork will be all right, and I think they might harbour better ambitions of just staying in the league. I'm sure Tim Clancy will be saying outwards, stay in the league at all costs. But yeah, I wouldn't be saying Europe, but I think they'll be comfortable enough. I don't think they'll be looking over their shoulder too much over the season, Raf. But to be fair, I don't know who is. I'm looking at Drogheda, and I think they're always going to be there or thereabouts, but will generally just poke the head above it. I'm not. I have no idea, but that's why I love the league. I'm looking at probably 4 teams that can go and win it, and the other 6 are in a relegation battle. So I'm not too sure, Raf. But one thing is, it's really, really exciting stuff, and I can't wait for Friday.
Yeah, the first division is going to be exciting as well. But Graham, I know you have you've got a busy time, so I know you've got to head on. So I'll just let you go. But I'm sure. Well, actually, what I will do before you go, do you want to call who you think is going to win the Premier Division?
Oh, I don't know. Because I don't know. I genuinely I don't want to call it because then someone shows me back and your man Gartland came on and said this about I'd say it was Brian. But I don't know who's going to win it. I think I genuinely think it's between Rovers, Pats, and Shels. I think it's between them 3, and whoever can score the most goals, I think will win it.
That's the wise answer there as well.
Thank you. See you lads, okay?
Yeah. Best luck. Yeah. So that's always been my strategy in terms of doing predictions as well, because I have a habit of always getting them wrong. But first division, I was speaking to Ciarán Kilduff at the launch on Wednesday, and he's kind of optimistic about where Dundalk is at, because from afar he was watching the problems that were happening at a club that he himself has loved playing for back around 2015 and 2016, and this is what he had to say.
Some really worrying days, and I had some friends who are still players up there involved in it, and you never like to see it, and the club has so much history, and some of it that I was part of, and of course, listen, you can't help when you're being a player and you've been with a club through some good times, and then you see them in the bad times. You can't help but try and relate and help, and little did I know I'd be the manager next one in after all of those troubles. But listen, I think we got the right people in the building. I think John Temple and people like that who came in and saved the club, and Chris Clinton, these people went to war for it, and then to get us out of the hole we were in was something that people need to realise how serious it was, and to be still around now. There's a real good feeling around the club now, knowing that it nearly feels like we're lucky to be here. There's a bonus, and that was kind of part of it for me, going, this is a brand new rebuild, a brand new reset, and what an opportunity for probably a young manager like myself to go in and have the opportunity to build something here. So obviously I've seen the club during their great times, and we're just hopeful that in years to come we can get them back there.
Yeah. All right, so that is Dundalk's new manager, Ciarán Kilduff. Of course, did wonders for Athlone Town in the Women's Premier Division as well. But Keith, in terms of the job he has now, the dust is settling a little bit, and they've kind of got a mix of youth and experience. The likes of Daryl Horgan has stayed at the club. Keith Ward is coming back for a 4th spell, and then there's some young players like Owen Kenny, and then their centre back Myoma, and a couple other players as well that he seems to be very excited about.
Yeah, and look, the mood music around Dundalk is obviously really, really poor over the last probably 12 months or so. And I did the last game against Shamrock Rovers, and they had all the fight in the world, they had all the will, they were trying their hearts out, but they just lacked that little bit of quality at the top level of the game. And again, look, I think Owen Kenny, I've seen enough of him in the Premier Division to think there's something there. He could go on to be a real player. I think Daryl Horgan is still somebody who has a little bit left in the locker. So I'm sure Ciarán Kilduff is looking and thinking the mood music is not great. Everybody seems a little bit downbeat. But when he gets the lads on the training pitch, it's probably not weighing up in his head. Maybe we're a little bit better than people are actually giving us credit for. And look, when you're a professional footballer, there's always going to be noise in and around the club. But being a professional means you have to still perform at your maximum when all that stuff is happening off the pitch. I know it's bread and butter stuff. It's not the luxury of England where, no matter what, you're still going to be getting paid, and it's just about your performance. But this is, putting dinner on table for people. So it really is their livelihood. So it's difficult to just keep trucking on and keep going and going as a professional, but that's what they need to do. And I think they have enough players in it to, I don't think, is the aim to bounce back straight away. I'm sure it is. Do they have enough on the pitch? Time will tell, Raf. I'm not too sure. I think there's a couple of teams in the lower division that will have eyes on coming up. So it'll be a difficult task, but one that Ciarán Kilduff, I'm sure, is thinking, if I do this, he's done really well on the women's side of football. He's come to the men's side now, and he'd be very eager to prove himself.
Yeah, and in terms of the clubs that'll push them closest, who do you think it'll be? Because Cove Ramblers, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of ex-Cork City players that just all left Cork City and then moved over to Cove over the winter. I was talking to Keane Coleman as one, and then the other Athlone Town who were buying a lot of players from overseas seem to have actually bought a lot of interesting players domestically. And then, of course, Stephen Elliott. I don't know that you would have crossed over on them with Ireland. I think not necessarily at senior level, but
we were at Preston together.
Oh, Preston together, yeah. No,
Yeah.
Stephen, I've known him for many years as well, and of course, he's starting his management journey now with Wexford, having cut his teeth at youth level. So, who do you feel is pushing? Who will push closest in terms of either the top end of the playoff places and then maybe even automatic?
Again, Raf, I'm not too sure. I think it could be anyway. It's fairly similar to the Premier Division, where we probably have 4 or 5 teams that we're thinking will be there or thereabouts. I think Cove will be decent, as you mentioned. Athlone, I think are doing really well at the minute. Bray will probably be there or thereabouts. It's really, really difficult to tell. I'd love to see Stephen Elliott hit the ground running with Wexford and be able to do it. I met Sleevesy when I first saw him for Preston, and he was actually, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, he was actually in the bomb squad at the time. Darren Ferguson was trying to get rid of him, so he was actually in a different dressing room because the manager was trying to get rid of him. But a really, really funny bloke. Enjoyed my time at Preston with him, and no surprise whatsoever. He came into the St. Pat's Academy last year as the sort of an under 21s development squad, whatever the proper term is these days, reserve. It was the reserve team when I was young. It's a development under 23s squad now. And yeah, very sharply he got the Wexford offer, and he really fancied it. And it was when he came into the Pats Academy, he always said he wanted to be a manager and he wanted to go and prove himself at that. So I wouldn't be surprised if Wexford are there or thereabouts, Raf. But again, it's brilliant to be out of it and looking at it and thinking, which way is this going to unfold? Because look, I thought it was brilliant. Trotted it against Bray in the playoff relegation last season, had me on the edge of my seat. So I'm sure we'll get just as much drama this season.
For sure. And of course, the Women's Premier Division to come next month as well, as we discussed with Rachel as well. But Rachel, on the other hand, the Republic of Ireland women's national team, there's a huge amount of change coming now. So Carla Ward, who was appointed as the new manager to replace Eileen Gleeson, so she's naming her first squad for the upcoming Nations League games against Turkey and Latvia, and that's going to be this week. The first of those matches, of course, being next Friday, the 21st in Tala, which will obviously be a big occasion. Lots of interest given the change at the top. But I suppose first off, let's talk about the players that have kind of departed the scene. There's a few retirements. Julianne Russell, the most recent one, but also Niamh Fahey previous to that as well, from international duty in her case, whereas obviously Julianne Russell is just retiring from club and international. But what impact do you think those exits will have on the squad that is left there?
Yeah, we've also Diane Caldwell has retired as well. So her and they haven't played a whole lot in the last few games. So I think for them, it's more you're losing kind of, your leadership roles within and around the squad and those senior figure for players to come in and look up to. So that's not something you can really, call someone in to replace that kind of role. So that's maybe someone who's already in the squad the last few years might step up into them roles. And then Julianne, then, obviously she was great for us that she was playing in Air League, and, she was a great role model for all young players who were looking at her, and she was as athletic and competing with all these best players in the world, and she was playing in our league, so she was brilliant. So it's a shame to see her retire, and I'd love to see someone else from the league being called in there. But it was interesting, she made comments to say she had reached out to agents of players, say English players or US players who were eligible for Ireland, so she could possibly go down that route. But then they've also set up a development squad in the last couple of weeks, so we've always kind of had this issue where, we go 19s to seniors, and it's a huge step. So we kind of lose a lot of players where they finish playing 19s, but they're just not ready to step up to senior level. And there's a good few players in that bracket, and some really young talented players. So they've all been called in now to train next week, and they'll play against their 19s. So it's mostly home based, but there's also the Emily Whelan, Erin McLaughlin, who've gone away recently. So Carla will watch over that match, and she might see someone she likes, and she has said she'll come to League of Ireland games and keep an eye on that. So that's brilliant for us. But then we've the other players like Jamie Finn, she's back training now. Jessu, she'll be straight back in, I'm sure, once she's back fit. Tara O'Hanlon, I'm sure, just missed out. I think she struggled a lot with injuries, but I think she would have been in the squad. She's recently just had a slight knock on her knee, so maybe not this camp but the next camp. But look, she's a lot of choices to make, and then there's also the 3 girls who've been let go by their club, so that's an interesting one to see. It's Rusha, Grace Maloney and Marissa Shiva have been let go, so currently not attached to a club. So it'd be interesting to see if they're called in. But I don't think there'd be a whole load of changes. I think she's only in the role not even a month at this stage. So I can't see there being anything too strange from the last camp bar, the retirements. But yeah, and I'll be interested to see tomorrow and then from future on camps as well, what way she goes.
Yeah, I did see her at the launch actually, which kind of suggests, I think, as you say, she's got that interest in trying to be close to the league and actually at least having a look, and will be seen at games and that as well. But she's obviously managed over in the UK with the likes of Aston Villa, Birmingham City, Sheffield United, and has come in with a good, good reputation. What do you know about her, sort of what her tactical style might be? Because of course we saw how Vera Pauw's team played, we've seen how Eileen Gleeson's team played, and generally the system generally stayed the same, as in it was a back three. But do you know what Carla Ward's preferences are going to be?
The one thing she did mention was, she said the teams that she had coached previously, the one thing she likes is to be exciting to watch. And she did kind of tease that, it'd be a style and a system that the players aren't used to. So she didn't give much away. But the thing is, it's great having philosophies and styles and systems you want to put in play. But when you're with a club, you're with them players every day, and it's much easier to kind of implement these things. But when you come into an international camp, you maybe have 3 or 4 days before a game to work on all these things. So it is harder, and it's not that she can't do it or she won't do it. I just think it takes more time. I can't see we play Turkey now in the next game that anything's going to be mad or completely different. It's just for her now about getting a win in them games, how she goes about it. But I think over the long term, yeah, she's hinted at it's going to be exciting and it's going to be a new style. So look, time will tell. But hopefully, yeah, we win the games, and we've qualified for a World Cup recently enough, and the players have got a taste for that. The fans have got a taste for that. So that's where we want to be now. And obviously, losing out in the Euros was massively disappointing. So I think once you get to one tournament, it's like that's the standard now, and that's where we want to be on Euros and World Cup. So look, hopefully we get there. But it's definitely not an easy task, but I definitely do think we have the players to do it.
Yeah, and in terms of your own experiences, like going, where you're going into an international camp, but if the ideas at international level are going to be different in terms of whatever the manager wants compared to club level, how difficult is that when you've only got that little brief bit of time to try and adjust to different ideas and then go back to your club where I suppose you're more settled?
Yeah, the other side is players are coming from all different levels as well, and say Kate McCabe is playing for Arsenal and she's out to win every week, and then you might have some players at lower levels that are set up to defend for 90 minutes. So it's hard to kind of find that balance and getting everyone on the same page. But look, it's the same for every international team, so you can't really use it as an excuse. Everyone has the same amount of time, so it's just about, I think she mentioned it before, it's just about having the messages as clear and concise as possible, and just making it as easy as possible for the players, because it's tough you only have that 3 or 4 days, and usually players are coming in and they might have played for their club the day before they're in, so you can't overwork players. So it's hard to find that balance, and obviously she come from club football, but she has had international experience with
with the US.
So she obviously knows that and she understands that. So look, it is doable. Other countries do it, so we can't sit here and say it's not. But it is hard to get that balance, especially because all of our players are at different levels at different clubs.
Yeah, and the first few games, of course, and the first few windows are going to be this Nations League, where Ireland were very much on top the last time they were in League B and sort of kind of breezed through it. So there's an expectation it'll be kind of similar enough. The World Cup phase, the structure is going to be quite different, but there is a bit of lead-in time. How crucial do you feel that is going to be, especially against this kind of level of opposition before going into what would hopefully be sort of a League A sort of level for the qualifiers?
Yeah, it's obviously similar to what we had the last time, where we kind of almost breezed through the games, and it's almost like you nearly get a false sense of, we can do this and we can win these games easy, we can score all these goals. But once you go up to the higher level, it's so much tougher, and you need to be realistic with your expectations and how we go about winning games. It's not going to be us on the front foot for 90 minutes and attacking the goal. It might be you have to sit in, you catch them on the break, or you'd have to play for a free kick. So look, we can get there, but it might not be the pretty way of getting there. But you just need to be realistic. It's how we got to the World Cup. We got through a playoff, and defended for our lives to the last 10 minutes of a game. So you have to just play to your strengths as well. And she has mentioned the Irish mentality and how passionate we are, and that's part of our culture. That's in our blood, where it's the fighting Irish, and we're we'll try our best to win everything. So you have to tap into that, have it, use everything you can. So look, if that's the route we have to go, that's the route we go. Just get us to that tournament.
Yeah, and similarly, I think in the Champions League, our live game is going to be Celtic against Bayern Munich, RT2 and RT Player from 7:30 on Wednesday. And I imagine, Keith, Celtic, of course, are going to have that sort of challenge against Vincent Kompany's Bayern Munich, who score goals for fun in the Bundesliga and in Europe. But I suppose on the flip side, from an Irish point of view, Johnny Kenny going from, playing in the League of Ireland just before Christmas and obviously doing really well in the European games as well, to because Dyson Maeda is suspended, he's going to be sitting on the bench coming up against Bayern Munich. That's an amazing turn of events for him.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And Koigo has left the building as well. So I think Adam all of a sudden just feels like he's really important to Celtic. And sometimes you just need to feel that little bit of love. I've been in teams before where you sort of know you get to the 55th minute and you're looking over your shoulder thinking any minute now he's going to take me off. And I think Adam sort of felt like that. He's been put on and he always had another option on the bench, but he feels like the main man now. He's starting to score a couple of goals, and I think it's brilliant that March international is just creeping up on us now, Raf, as well. So from Adam Eda's point of view, he can realistically knock on Hamer Hagums's door and say, Gaffer, I'm playing every week, I'm scoring goals, what's the story here? I should be starting. And to be fair, Troy Parrott's going to be right behind him as well, saying, Gaffer, what's the story? And then we've probably Evan, who has just got his move to West Ham, hasn't really played any football yet, but I think we all look at Evan as that little, that person that could be the one to score the goal. So there's a whole host of things there. But one thing I will say, if Adam Eda starts scoring goals in, the Champions League proper against the likes of Bayern Munich, he's got to be starting for Ireland, because we don't have strength and depth in that position. Although Evan has all the potential in the world, we need to win games here and now, and that playoff in March is absolutely massive. So whoever's in form should play, and that's the way it should always be. There shouldn't be, well, my name is X, Y, or Z, and that's enough to get me into the team. It's all about form, and it's all about who's playing. And at the minute, Troy Parrott is doing really well at AZ Alkmaar, and Johnny Kenny could come into the Celtic squad as well. So look, there's some really big green shoots at the minute. But we've had this before, Raf, and then you go into the international scene and it all falls apart. But we'll worry about that when we come to it. But at the minute, Adam is doing brilliant. And as you say, a couple of months ago, this didn't really seem like it was going to happen. So it's brilliant for him.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant as well. The 2 goals against Aston Villa as well would have done him a huge amount of confidence. The other thing as well, of course, as you mentioned, Troy Parrott doing really well in the Netherlands with AZ. Gavin Bazunu, probably not the best start for Standard Liège there last night. He's on loan in Belgium at the moment, conceded 4 goals. Andrew Omobamidele, he was starting for Strasbourg last night, helped keep a clean sheet, apparently played really well. Festi Abasele injured, but he's gone permanently to Istanbul Başakşehir at the moment. So there is this changing mindset, I suppose, for kind of young and up and coming Irish players in terms of being willing to go away. And then Graham mentioned earlier Ike Orazi, who made his Ligue 1 debut, having started at Shamrock Rovers and now is at Stade Reims in France. But on the flip side, Rachel, in the women's game, that was actually something that was a lot more common. Even looking at the CVs of the players that have played for Ireland, or even like the likes of Diane Caldwell, who we just talked about there in terms of retirement, like she spent a lot of time in and around the continent in the US. So it was always something that women's players were always willing to do.
You would have seen a lot of players go to kind of like Germany and like Belgium. US would be a big one, like a college. A lot of players would go to college in the US and play football. Yeah, we've seen it quite a lot over the last few years, and even our own one of our own players is over in Lake Como at the moment, so she's just doing 6 months over there, and then she'll transfer back. So like there's loads of opportunities for women in Europe. But yeah, no, we've seen it. It's never something I've had the opportunity to do, and I obviously just came around too late, I think, for all that. So I think if it was 10 years ago, I'd definitely be looking to do it. It's a great lifestyle, but like that, we're still in the balance of professional and you're going for an experience, and you're going for a professional. Like it's still getting that balance right.
Yeah, actually, I think Pearl Slattery, your teammate, I think she mentioned a few of you have gone across, I think, to Como at this stage. I don't know if you got the chance to go yourself, but anyway, it's a nice part.
I went over a couple of weeks ago. It's a lovely part of the.
So I've heard, yeah.
Done well, yeah.
Yeah, but I suppose finally, Keith, you mentioned City and Real Madrid earlier, and that is a blockbuster, Champions League playoff tie at this stage of the competition. Although maybe taking a bit of hype out of it, and the fact that Manchester City are nowhere near what they have been, but still, do you give them any chance against Real Madrid, who themselves have a few kind of teething problems as well?
Yeah, look, when you look at the form of the two teams, I think Manchester City have won 8 of the last 24 competitive games, and for a bang average club, that's not a bad return. But when you've got the financial resources that Manchester City have and the talent in the building that Manchester City have, it's just not good enough. And I don't buy into this. A lot of people are saying the legs have gone. The legs aren't gone of everybody. 33 is not, it's not the same 33 as it was 5 years ago. You look at Mo Salah still producing at that age. It's all about how you look after yourself. But so many people, like Bernardo Silva, for me, has been really, really poor this season. Erling Haaland, I think, has been really petulant in the Arsenal games, although he scored in goals. But again, we go back to his build-up play and what he brings to the team. If he doesn't score, very, very minimal. I think Savinho is starting to get better. Doku has had his injuries as well. Foden has started to come to the party since the turn of the year, but generally it's been too little too late. Against Leyton Orient, I thought they were really poor as well against a fairly weakened team in Leyton Orient. They should be able to just bat them off, but just didn't seem to be able to do it. And you look at Real Madrid, Mbappe scored 16 league goals already this season. Bellingham has 7 from midfield. Vinicius Jr. has 8 and Rodrigo has 6. Those names absolutely terrify you in turnover. And when Manchester City really showed their jugular is when they're attacking and they have all the possession and then they lose it. Their jugular is exposed and Vinicius Jr. will just hang out on the periphery and think, I'm not dropping in there. I'm not going to come back and make another body. I'm just going to stand here and wait for you to lose it. And I would assume Manchester City will go and stand on the halfway line because that's what Manchester City do. And Vinicius Jr. and Mbappe, Rodrigo will all be licking their lips thinking, as soon as we win this ball, we're going to go right in behind you. And look, Carlo Ancelotti is not a manager who thinks we need to dominate possession. We need to look sexy. We need to do this. We need to do that. They will be sent out with the game plan to go and win the game. It doesn't matter if it's ugly. It doesn't matter if it's beautiful. Just go and win it. And that's one of the things that really attracts me to Ancelotti is that I think he lets a lot of the attacking lads just off the leash. You go and win us the game, but defensively, come here, do this, X, Y, and Z. And attacking-wise, these are all off the leash. And I think every attacking player loves that. But current form, Raf, I think Manchester City could take a right hiding here.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly see. But either way, the Celtic v Bayern Munich game is one we're going to have on Wednesday, 7:30, RT2 and the RT Player. But that is it for this week. Finally shaking off the ring rust after a couple of months. Just basically fattening myself up and just putting the feet up anyway. So anyway, next week we'll preview the Girls in Greens Nations League opener against Turkey, look back on the opening weekend of Premier Division action and talk Rovers versus Molde. So see you then. And Keith and Rachel, thanks for coming on.
Cheers, Raf.
All right, slán go fóill.